All right, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending our digital takeout series here, put on by the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, as well as USU's Career Services. Uh, Before we begin, I just want everyone to feel free to go ahead and use the chat function to go ahead and ask questions or to talk and to let us know if you're having any technical difficulties along the way. And also the question and answer feature to ask questions throughout the presentation. We have London monitoring those, and those will be using those questions to ask the presenter after the initial presentation here. Also, if you can just make sure that you send those questions or comments to all participants, that would be great so we can all see them. And now I'm going to turn the time back over to Andrea to introduce today's guest.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joseph. So my name is Andrea DeHaan. I am the Outreach Coordinator for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. And as Joe said, we welcome you to today's installment of the Alumni Lunch Series digital version. And I'm going to take a moment to tell you a bit about today's guest, Ben Oyler. Ben was born and raised in Cache Valley, attending USU football and basketball games, always intending to attend USU when it was time for college. At heart, Ben wanted to be an entrepreneur, build great businesses, and impact people in a real, impactful way. Ben picked his bachelor's degree based on his belief that the greatest skills to learn before entering his career would be around communication, the ability to react and interact in a number of different circumstances, and a well-rounded understanding of people. Following his graduation, Ben worked in a handful of small companies, learning, growing, adding value to the businesses he worked for, and in return, receiving a real education in the world of business. In the last 9 years, Ben has led 2 teams at Ancestry, building their well-known and industry-leading DNA and health businesses, working with partners and customers around the world. In February, Ben transitioned to a new role as the Chief Operations Officer at Laboratory for Advanced Medicine, LAM, a company focused on early-stage cancer diagnostics. Ben is passionate about building products and services that can help people to enjoy more health and wellness every day and even save lives. His second passion is career development, building teams, and seeing people excel in their individual careers. Ben currently lives in Riverton with his wife of 18 years and 4 kids ages 4 to 16. And so I'm going also to take a moment to ask Ben his first question. And in order to do that, I'm going to stop sharing my slide because in a moment, Ben is going to share some slides of his own. So while, Ben, you're pulling those slides up, I'm just going to remind the audience what the first question is, which is just to tell us a little bit about your current occupation, how you came to that current occupation, how you chose your career path, and what it is you like about your job. And with that, Ben, I will mute myself and let you take it from here.
Just trying to unmute myself here.
You're good, Ben. We can hear you. You may go ahead.
Oh, okay. I didn't know I was unmuted. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and really look forward to spending, an hour with the team and the faculty and talk a little bit about my career and some of the things that I believe you lead to not only, a good start to a career, but also a long-lasting career. So I took a little more time putting together my career background and a little bit about my my resume, because I think it's relevant to what we'll talk about throughout today. So I may share a little more than I normally would in just introducing myself, but I think you'll see why as we go through this. So following my time at Utah State, I started transitioning into business through internships. So in 2014, I went to a company who was selling product in kind of the cruise ship and entertainment and travel industry. The reason that I went, actually, and you'll note in some of my bullet points, my wife accused me of marrying her too early before we got to go out and do some fun things in life. And so I took her to Alaska, and we took on this job that I really believed had a ton of broad experience. We ran a store where we were in charge of people and inventory and P&Ls and marketing and partnerships. And we really were able to get a huge, vast experience across a really broad experience in business. And like was introduced before, I really felt like the best way to excel long term was to get a good breadth of experience in the short term. And towards the end also, which I think is relevant, I started to look for opportunities to grow and did so by bringing in and learning about overseas manufacturing and partnering overseas with some products. So following 2008, I was asked to come and join a company here locally to build their business, add a bunch of business lines they didn't currently have. We built brand for a number of companies, some that are really well known around Utah for sure, but also around the globe, and be able to just refine their operation and make things a little bit better. I spent about 2 years there. And this is a big career point for me because at the end of that 2 years, my job was actually eliminated. And so I got to experience the joys right during the recession back in 2010 of being unemployed. So I took that opportunity to go back to my roots, which we also mentioned at the beginning, which was to go out and do something on my own. And so I started a company with a good friend of mine called Baby Fruit. It was a retail company, baby products, blankets, and diaper bags, and all sorts of really great stuff that we were sourcing around the world. We were talking to Target, Costco, Walmart. We were traveling around the country, meeting with retailers and getting ready to kick off that process. And a tremendous amount of learnings there as you learn about owning a company and building something from scratch and being responsible for every single thing that happens in a company. But like before, 18 months without a paycheck became almost unbearable for our family. We had a little family of 4 at that time. And so I had a good friend come and ask me if I would come and build Ancestry's DNA business. So there was no operations team at Ancestry. If you know, I hope you know, I think you know probably about Ancestry. They sold, web subscriptions to do your genealogy. And so none of the operations, none of the supply chain was built for a DNA business. And so I took on that responsibility back in 2011. We took about a year and a half to launch that product, and then got to experience really massive exponential growth. I think in 2015, 16, and 17, we over Black Friday and Cyber Monday, that 5-day window, we were the largest selling product on Amazon outside of some of their own core products like Echo Dots and things like that. We were selling 16 units a second during some of that part of those days. And so we really had to do things differently than anyone had done before. One of the other things that was a real challenge at Ancestry that I think is relevant is that we weren't able to really often look at the industry in which we were a part of to see how we grow. We couldn't say, hey, who's doing it like we're doing it? Because we were the biggest. We had the biggest laboratories. We had the biggest biorepository. We had some of the biggest fulfillment systems outside of like the big guys like Target, Walmart, and Amazon. We were actually having to negotiate rates on FedEx airplanes around the holidays because there wasn't enough capacity. And so you had to bid for space. Just the amount of things you had to learn and understand. And you couldn't just go out and say, who's building this like we are, because they didn't exist. And so we spent time looking into different industries. If we were putting together, a fulfillment facility, we looked at the Amazons, or if we were putting together manufacturing, we went and looked at people in the auto industry and in some other industries to learn and understand what they did best and then try and apply it to us. I was fortunate enough to be part of a patent that collects saliva. So our DNA saliva collection device is one of the most sold devices in the world. Our manufacturing plant for that is the largest in the world. And just was able to see a ton of opportunity as we grew an operation to successfully support the largest genomic supply chain in the world. We launched products in Canada and Australia, the UK, Ireland, and had manufacturing in Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, and throughout Europe. So really a great opportunity to grow my career and spend the things that I had learned in my early career, and then learn from that and use those skills to be able to move forward. So loved that time there. I transitioned. I kept the role of what they called an operations specialist, optimization. So I continued to build some of the big processes, left the operations, day-to-day operations behind. And when we hired a new CEO in 2018, she asked that I would come on and lead from a more general management function, our strategy and business operations for the launch of our health product. So I spent 2 years really building a very disruptive business, owning all of it from a general manager, full P&L, really spending more time even than before in executive leadership and board meetings and making sure that our board and our owners knew and understood what we were trying to accomplish. And then look, Ancestry is a complex organization. And when you try and introduce new businesses into a traditional business that understands how to do things, it comes with a massive amount of complexity. And so we really had to tackle that head on. And I spent a lot of my time just educating, even internally in the building, what we were trying to do. And then from an innovation standpoint, we were doing things that, again, no one had done before. There's a technology called next generation sequencing. It's sequencing your DNA. It's traditionally been extremely expensive, really slow. Some of the largest labs in the world are running a couple 100,000 samples a year on this technology. And we were testing millions of people a year on the technology we were on. And so we had a massive innovation gap that we needed to close in order to launch our health product, in order to be able to bring not only the scale of NGS to the point where we could test all of our customers, but also deal with price and the complete supply chain. So really exciting stuff, and being able to launch something that can be impactful to people. On the DNA side, you see stories and you get to hear of people who have found lost family and who have been able to reunite or break down barriers that they've been searching for years and sometimes decades. On the other side, you really truly get to save lives through the Ancestry Health product. There's 5% of our population who have a disease that all they would need to do, it affects your liver, and all you need to do is go and give blood every month or every quarter, and it can save your life. But if you don't do it, if you don't know you have it, and your liver degrades or erodes to a point where you're so sick, and when you find out that your liver's already past a certain point, there's no recovering from it. And so tests like Ancestry Health really can save people. They can find out things before they become disruptive to them, and you can just learn so much about yourself and about your family. So really exciting product, and something that is still launching even today since I've left the company. And then as mentioned, I joined a company called LAM, Laboratory for Advanced Medicine. One of the things that I would tell people in my later years at Ancestry was that the day would come when I would have to leave, but I didn't know that I would ever find an opportunity to affect as many people as I did at Ancestry. So Ancestry's tested nearly 20 or a little over 20 million people, and so to impact that many people seemed like something that was going to be a hard thing to find. And when LAM came and asked me if I would join as their chief operating officer, and I dug into the technology, looked at the opportunity, early cancer detection is one of the industries that, as of today, could impact likely more people on the planet than almost any other industry from a health and wellness standpoint. There is hundreds of millions of people who will get cancer. And if they can find that cancer in stage 1 or early in stage 2, they can have 90 to 95% likelihood of beating it, or at least controlling it, managing it. As soon as you get to stage 3 and stage 4 of cancer, it almost inversely flips. You're almost 10% likely to live and 90% likely to die. And so finding cancer in that early stage is so critical to people being able to live healthy lives, that I couldn't pass it up. I mean, literally the opportunity to build and commercialize something that can save that many people from what is a terrible, awful disease and catch cancer early is just too good to pass up. And so I've been here since the first of the year and look forward to, doing some just amazing things here and thinking about things differently. And although I've been manufacturing and working in Asia for a long time, we have a whole team there. We're going to launch in both geographies this year, and just really excited to build on something. So with that, I guess the only other thing I'd mention, was a glutton for punishment back in 2014 and got my MBA. I felt like that was something really important in my career, and it's something for everyone to think about as they go throughout their careers. What is their education journey as well as their career journey? So I'll pause there and let you ask me the next question.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ben. Yeah, that is an awesome career path that you've had. And so I'm thinking, at least from career services, I know that, and kind of the theme of today's panel here is that we talk a lot about how people can find jobs, how students can get their first jobs and such. And really, we also try to help teach skills on how they can improve within their job. But, coming from your standpoint, we want to talk today also about how do you advance your career once you're in the job, and what kind of things should you be looking out for? And so, just one of the first questions I have here is, what general things would you recommend to a new employee that they do like within the first 90 days to make a real good impression within an organization once they join?
Yeah, I think it's 100% true that your first impression is really critical. But I also think that in the job world, it's not just that first impression, but it's also a little bit about how you're looked at and how people look at you over the first, if 90 days is the window you want to think about. And so I do think it's a great question, and it's really a critical time. And anytime you take on a new role, and I think there's a balance, and this is something that I think about often. I think there's a balance of how to be aggressive, but how to also come in and listen a lot. I think that as you start a new job, it's up to you to really listen for the first few months, and it'll go a long way to your success and being able to onboard in any given company. I think it's definitely a time to learn. You're going to learn company culture. You're going to learn about your job. You're going to learn about the people around you. You're going to learn about what makes people successful in the job that you've been hired for, and what maybe you should watch out for. And so really spending time learning, I think, is really critical. And then look, you can't pass up contribution. Contribution will always be something that a boss or a peer is looking for and watching to make sure that you can come on and you can contribute early. And you can take stuff off people's plate. The reason you're there is because there's a job to be done, and someone else is going to have to do it if you don't. And so making that, I think, is super important. And the one last thing that I would say that I think is really important, and I'll highlight this, I think, multiple times because it's something that I think is really important, is you need to not wait around for people to ask you to do things. Even in the first 90 days, it's about finding what is undone, what needs to be done. And if you just wait for your boss or your supervisor or even a peer to come to you and say, hey, can you help me here? Or hey, can you do this job? Or here's your list of tasks to do over the next week. I don't think that you'll be very successful. I think it's about proactively going out and looking for opportunities to go and find work. And I'd say, like, business is a team sport. It's not all about you. Early in your career, it's going to be hard to, hold yourself back and do some things. But I think if you always remember that this is a team sport, and that multiple people win when you win, and when others win, you can win as well. I think would really help people in their first, call it 90 days as they start their any job along their career path.
Ben, that's great advice, especially for new job seekers or people starting out in a career. But we also hear a lot about characteristics like perseverance and grit as being the key to success in the workplace. But they can indeed be, difficult to measure and even to achieve, right? Some people may see them as like, well, that's a personality trait, and that's not my personality. So what are ways that you have found in your own experience that someone might be able to develop these qualities both in and out of the workplace?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I actually spent a lot of time talking to my teams about, something very similar to this. And I would warn that as much as, things like perseverance and grit need to be a part of your everyday, characteristics and your work ethic, it can be just as dangerous if you go in and you're pounding with a, heavy hammer and you're getting in people's business and you're not allowing the group to coalesce around each other and have really good synergy. And so it's a healthy balance, and it's something that, again, I would watch for early, find your place, and then start to nurture those things as you go. Look, again, work is about people, and everyone has a different personality. You need to think about your customer depending on what kind of business you're in. You need to think about the people who you are working around you. You got to think about the company as a whole. And all those things play a huge role in how you implement different, work ethics and work characteristics. And so it's really something that is different in every role you take. And gauging that environment and figuring out what the right thing is, making sure you treat people differently. You don't need to treat, you need to talk to your peers differently than you talk to your boss, or if you ever get a chance to talk to executives, you need to meter out how you speak with them and how you communicate and what level of information you're providing them. And so, to get at the heart of these characteristics and others that I think are really important. I tell my team they should be spending, and that I want to be very clear about this, they should be spending 30% of their time improving themselves. Now, when I say that, they're like, I can't, out of a 40-hour work or a 50-hour work week, how do you expect me to do 30% of that self-improvement? And so I want to talk just a minute about how I see that. If you just go to work every day and do your job and you go home, you're not doing any self-improvement. I'm not advocating that you go in and for 3 of your 9 hours of the day, you sit in front of your computer and read self-help articles. But what I am saying is you should be thinking about, I just came out of that meeting. How did I present? How do I do better next time? So-and-so said something in that meeting and I realized I was being a little too pushy. I should have backed off a little bit, or I should have been a little better at communicating that principle or the way that I analyze that data. Those are self-improvement time. Yes, you should read articles, and yes, you should read good books, and you should be able to, keep up with industry standards. But most of that 30% is about, how do I do better? How do I improve what I just did? What would I do next time? How I haven't learned a whole lot about marketing. How do I go connect with someone in marketing and learn a little bit about their job? The mirroring people, and can I come to that meeting with you so I can understand things from your side a little better? So I think that those are the kind of things that allow you to really, gain the characteristics like perseverance and grit, and also meter those out appropriately so that you don't turn out being, the bull in the china shop, or, you get the reputation that, yeah, that guy's a bulldog, but I don't want to have anything to do with him because I don't like working with him, even though I know he gets a lot of stuff done. So it's something you got to work on all the time. And remember that 30% rule, I think is something that you should sit at the end of every week and see, have you really spent 30% of your time in career development?
Right. Thanks. Let's see. My next question. This one's a little bit more about, obviously business and work is, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So this is a little bit more on the endurance side. Let's say, I've been working with an organization for a while now, and that newness and that excitement that comes right at the beginning is kind of faded away. How do I help maintain that or even rekindle that motivation that was there before?
Yeah. So, I might be a little bit, upfront on this one, but I think I think I'm right. We'll see. But look, if you're getting bored or stagnant of your job, I bet that it is because it's you who is not looking for opportunities to learn, grow, and excel, and looking to take on projects that maybe aren't right in front of you, but they're right around the corner. I'll go back and give you, we talked a little bit about this, and I I saved some of this, so we could talk about it today. But when I joined Ancestry, there was no operations department. In fact, I was just a manager. I wasn't even, that well respected. It was a junior level job at the time. And on day one, I said to myself, look, if this is the job, this is not the job I want. I want to excel and grow and learn. And so I looked for every opportunity I could to take on more roles and take on more responsibility. Early on, we needed to acquire a company that had a lot of DNA samples. And I went to my boss and I said, hey, I'll run the M&A from an operations and logistics standpoint. He said, sure, someone needs to do that. So I took on that. We were developing standard operating procedures for our laboratories as we were developing a process, and our product manager was overwhelmed building our website. And so I said to him, hey, let me go do all that. I'll go meet with the labs. I'll build it. I understand it's a 30-page document, but I'll take it on. I'll go do it. And of course he's like, amen. Let's go do that. But it put me in a position where I was the one traveling to the labs, meeting with executives. I was meeting with our executives because that's who was attending these meetings, because it was such a big deal to get the labs up and going. And so my exposure to leadership at Ancestry was something that grew exponentially because I was putting myself in those positions. Further down the line, someone needed to run the whole launch project and meet with all the teams. And I said, sure, I can do that. I'll have weekly meetings. I'll meet with everyone on the side. So you can kind of get the idea that, or you kind of can understand, at least from my perspective, if you're feeling like the newness is wearing off, if you're feeling like it's mundane, I really do think it's because you're not looking for the opportunities that will not make it mundane anymore. Now, I will say, you cannot be obnoxious. I have worked with people who, won't leave you alone, and you have to find the niche that's missing and go after it. You have to look for ways to help and not ways to just make someone's job more cumbersome. But there is really good ways to make your role always exciting. And I'll give you another, kind of tidbit for me, or things that I think about all the time, is that if you haven't been uncomfortable in your role for a while, it's because you're not growing. And so if you're feeling comfortable and you're starting to feel this excitement wane, it's likely because you're not pushing yourself, and you probably have some room to grow there. I will say though, the work is not always fun. There is days when you're just building widgets and experiences for customers that just work has to be done. A lot of the last year and a half at Ancestry was just, slogging through a lot of documentation, because when you're launching a health product, it's now regulated, and you have to be very careful, because now you're telling people not only just, where they came from and who they might be related to, but you're telling people, you may be predisposed to a pretty serious disease. And so there was a lot of just document after document after document. So don't go away thinking every day is going to be fun. But I would say that you really do control your own, in a lot of ways, you control your own ability to relieve that, mundaneness, and when you're feeling like things aren't new or exciting anymore.
Excellent. Well put, Ben. And to build off of that question, I've got a final question. But before I go to that, I just want to remind our attendees who are listening this morning, if you have any questions for Ben, we'll be moving into the Q&A shortly. So be sure to use the Q&A window to add those there, or to message London directly, and she'll take care of those here in a few minutes. Ben, to sort of go beyond that idea of how you jump in and you avoid becoming too comfortable in your position, what are ways that you can tell if you're advancing, at the right pace within a company? And how do you balance between expecting too much too soon and becoming too stagnant or complacent in your role?
Yeah, I like this question. And I want to take a step back, because, a lot of what we've talked about is, my career, and I am definitely one who is always looking for something just incredible to go after. And I want to make it very clear, that's not everyone's career path. And so not all people are alike. And so you need to sit down with yourself and first of all decide, what does my career look like? Both from what do I want to do, but then, where do I want to go in my career? I had a team at Ancestry that was pretty broad. So I had product managers who were developing, websites and things that they were actually, was going to get touched by a lot of customers. I had a whole department for program managers. I had analysts sitting that were evaluating both the current business and evaluating what our future trends were, what our future opportunities were. I had engineers that were coding, computer engineers, but I also had, structural and industrial and mechanical engineers that were working on my operations. And each one of those have very different career tracks. And within each of those groups, some of them want to be leaders. Some of them want to be mentors. Some of them want to just sit at their desk and do really cool data-driven analytics. And they don't want anything to do with career journey, career path from a, climb the ladder and be someone else's boss. What they wanted to do was every day they come to work, put out incredible data and incredible products. And so I think first of all, before you even start asking that question about, am I on the right pace or whatever, you have to sit and internalize, what do I want? Because how I would suggest someone who just wants to be an individual contributor their whole life would be very different than someone who wants to become a COO or a general manager or something. And so that's first. Second is, once you've done that, then you got to stop looking around. Because a lot of people will say, well, now I'm jealous of that guy or that lady because there she goes. Or, it's something where you have to be comfortable in your own skin. And it doesn't mean you don't change. If, someday you decide I want to follow, I saw, Margo, who was our CEO. I originally wanted to be an individual contributor, but I just love the way that she talks and speaks and her career track. I want to follow her. And so you can change, but you can't look around, because the minute you start looking around, you're going to say, I'm not that person. And you're right. You're not that person. So I think that's really important. So once you've done that, early in your career, my suggestion was take a deep breath, slow down a little bit. It will take time. I can use another personal example here. When I started at Ancestry in 2011, there was no organization. If you actually look at my, LinkedIn profile, I actually moved into product for a while because there was no operations organization at Ancestry. So when you say, hey, Ben, what was your career ladder? I'm like, I have no clue, because there's no department even to have a career ladder in. So I moved into product, kept doing roughly what I was doing in operations, but at least there was a management structure that I could live with. Well, in 2014, I can't remember, they asked me to come back and actually build the operations organization. And I built in 2014 and 2015, one of the most diverse, well-rounded teams at the company. We focused on equal pay. We focused on diversity. We focused on, getting incredible people. We had just an incredible team. We did surveys across the company. We always had some of the best survey scores I was very proud of what we were doing. And alongside of that, we were building a supply chain and an operation that was world-class. No one even was close to us. And we were, delivering products for Ancestry at a pace that no one ever believed would happen. So I'd go into the room and I'd sit down, and every one of the people in the room were vice presidents. Everyone. There wasn't a soul in the room wasn't a vice president. And I think at that time I may have been a director, but I may not have been. I don't remember. And there was times I'd walk into my boss's office and I would say, come on, like really, like when do I get the opportunity? I'm sitting with all of these people. And he kept saying, like, you have things to learn. You got to learn leadership. It's different. Keep going, whatever. And I have to admit, I'd go home frustrated and mad at times. I got there eventually. I look back now and I have people doing the same thing to me. And it's funny. You sit back. It's like being a parent, I guess. And you say to the same people the same things that were being told to you. So remember, early in your career, slow down. Don't worry. Pace isn't as big a deal. And so when you ask the question, am I on the right pace? early on, don't worry so much about what's going on. I think that's really critical. And then if you're really on, regardless of the track you're on, whether you're on that individual contributor role or that, path to leadership and climbing the ladder, I would just tell you that you can a lot of times gauge. It's hard to gauge by title because you can't control that. So the thing that I've always said, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, I always gauge my growth on my uncomfortableness within my job. If I'm uncomfortable day in and day out, for the most part, I'm learning and growing. As soon as I get comfortable in my job, I'm not learning and growing anymore. And so since I can't control getting a promotion or getting a raise or getting all those things, I can control my learning and I can control how I personally am excelling. And most of the time, if you control that, the pace and the job and the opportunities and everything else will follow behind it. And so I try and look at things as, how do I control myself, the things I can control. I let other things, happen as they're going to happen. And I found great success in that. I've had an incredible career so far. I look forward to the next, 20 years of my career, and feel like if I can do what I've done in the past, 20 years, 15, 20 years, do it for the next 15, 20 years, I really will have, a full experience in the workforce that I can be proud of, and also come away having made an impact to both the people I've worked with, the people that worked for me, and hopefully on customers and the world at large.
Ben, thank you so much for everything you've shared so far. So now I'm going to ask some questions that we have coming in from our audience watching. You just talked a lot about career growth and stuff. So where do you see yourself in the next 8 to 10 years or so?
Yeah, right now, I can't see 5 minutes in front of my face. So it's really hard. Look, it's fun to do these startup businesses, because even at Ancestry, startup. And so for 2 years, I flew around the world. I think I took 50 something trips last year around the world, flew 180,000 miles and spent 100 plus nights in hotel rooms, launching a health product for Ancestry that will change the way we think about health and wellness. And so now I transitioned just about the time where I could sit back and enjoy what we did. I transitioned to LAM, where we are not in the 2 biggest economies in the world launching this early cancer diagnostics test. That the company has incredible research, some of the best, actually, even some of the better research than some of the ones you would maybe recognize or hear about, but just has not spent time on commercialization. So I'm buried right now in trying to get my teams both in Asia and in the US set up. But I think that if I can continue to impact equally people that work for me and work with me, and customers, whoever they may be, I see doing that for a very long time. I've never really I've always aspired to be a chief operating officer and run an organization. I'm not sure I ever want to be a CEO. I think they get beat up too much. And so this is a good balance for me, where I can really affect change within an organization and within a company and a product, but I don't have to have the responsibility to the board and to other executives that the CEO has to have. So I'm actually, I've worked really hard to get here, and hopefully can, stay in this spot. The other thing is, being able to serve other, small companies, possibly being able to help other entrepreneurs sit on boards or help do things like that is something that's interesting later in my career when I have a little more time. But it's all hands on deck right now. And of course, with our current ecosystem and environment around growth and things, starting a company was hard enough when you could travel and meet with people. When you have to do it completely from the confines of this nice office here, I do like my office, but it's really hard if you've ever done operations to launch things without being in front of people, and especially ones who don't speak English well and who you have to communicate with very carefully.
Great. I really enjoyed hearing about your whole career journey, and it sounds like you've got a good plan for the future. But I'm going to throw it back to what you said closer to the beginning of your presentation. You mentioned that in 2010, you hit a point where you were unemployed and you kind of became an entrepreneur. So what gave you the confidence to become an entrepreneur coming out of the recession? And do you have advice for those in current uncertain times?
Yeah, it is very relevant. And the funny that I shouldn't say funny, it wasn't funny at all. The thing that stuck out to me most back then was I was confident in my job. I was adding a tremendous amount of value, and the company just went a different direction. And so people should understand that it's not, necessarily about their performance or about who they are as a person or their skill level. Now, if you're not showing up to work on time and you're not doing your job, like that's a separate issue. But for those who are experiencing things like this for no fault of their own, I think you have to first and foremost realize what you can add to a company or to a business is really critical. The reason I jumped into the space that I did was I realized for me, sitting around and waiting for a job wasn't gonna be good for me. I did keep, my ears to the ground, and the whole time I was building that business, I still would talk to people and find out what's going on. I networked an incredible amount of time spent networking with people I knew, people they knew, building just a massive network of business people during that time. And so I really split my time into building a business was, critical and important for me. Networking, so that not whether I got a job or whether I needed it for my business, was really something I thought was important. And then I continued to look for work. And one of the things I did early on was I sat down and I said, what would I want to do with myself? What's the 30-second elevator pitch? So that when I meet with people and they say, hey, what do you want to be? Or what do you want to do? In 30 seconds, you could tell them what you wanted to be or what you wanted to do. And I narrowed it down to, I really wanted to impact people. And I wanted to do it, through a couple of mediums. I thought the internet was super interesting, and the space biotechnology was interesting. And I thought that the medical side of the business. And so when the opportunity with Ancestry came around, it wasn't hard for me, even though it was hard for me. I just did all this work to build this brand, and I'm going to put them all in boxes and put it in my house. It wasn't hard for me because I had clear. I already clearly defined what I wanted in my career. And so I knew when that option came around that it was a little easier to put the boxes away, to join this and really take off and do something that, I had set in my mind as something I wanted to do. And it hit both. It was an internet company that was doing stuff, kind of in the medical field through DNA. And so it kind of checked both my boxes. And so I jumped into it. But look, 18 months, not collecting a paycheck, trying to start a business, meeting with people, hoping that they would, like your product and like your brand and your vision, was an interesting time when you look back on it. And I hope people who are in that position now through no fault of their own over the last few months, it's just about hard work. Just keep your head down, pick your path, and just go out every day and execute that path. Don't get stuck thinking that you're not valuable or that you're not capable, and go out and win. And it's very personal, and everyone can go do it.
Thank you. So now I've got one last question for you today. A lot of successful CHAS grads combine their bachelor's degree with their bachelor's degree in the humanities with a master's in business. So how has this combination worked for you?
I think we touched on it during my intro. One of the things, bachelor's degrees, again, in my opinion, are a lot as much about what you learn through curriculum as you learn about developing yourself. And so I don't know that a lot of people who are in their bachelor's degrees, outside of people who are vocational, doctors and nurses and to some extent engineers, some people who, really will go out and use their degree throughout their whole career. I think for me, it was more important, like was said in the beginning, I picked something that would make me super well-rounded. Now, I'll give you one example quickly. when I chose my first career, I told you in my intro that it was super broad. So I was the head of HR. I was the head of marketing. I was the head of inventory and operations. I was in charge of the whole business, which made me very understanding of everyone else. Now, when I was out of work or when I was trying to be hired, it did hurt me a little bit because people wanted a person very niche, been doing that exact thing every day of their whole career. And I just fundamentally disagreed. I fundamentally believe that a person who has a broad understanding of what other people go through. And so when you sit in a room and you say, I want to do this, and they're like, I can't do that, you at least have some empathy and understand where they're coming from. And so I think a lot of the reason I joined the college that I did and did what I did was it was the same concept. I wanted some breadth and I wanted some understanding of people and places and concepts and theories. Then there was a point in my career, and I'll tell you the funny story. So we were running the mall in DC. We were meeting with a very well-known company about a partnership. I was running with the C-level executive of the company. And again, I was running the project and meeting with them. And we were running the mall, and we were up. I can still remember we were almost to the Capitol. We'd stayed right next to the White House, and we were running up next to the Capitol. And he said, "Hey, what was your degree in college?" And I'm like, "It was a communications degree." And he said, "So that's not going to help much where you're headed. So if I help you get in, if we help sponsor you into your MBA program, would you be willing to go so you have some of that business acumen and the credentials behind that?" And so I said, "Sure." And that's kind of the history of it. I would never trade my bachelor's degree in the whole world. I think it's prepared me to be extremely successful. But there was a time where it felt like and seemed like getting a business degree and coupling those together allowed me to accelerate into a more executive leadership role, to show people that, you know, my communications acumen was just as good as my business acumen and be successful on both fronts.
Awesome. All right. Well, Ben, thank you so much. It's been wonderful and great, you know, not only to hear about your career path, but also to hear, you know, more about your insights on career growth and how our students can help, you know, apply some of that experience and that wisdom to their own lives and such. So thank you so much for being with us here today and being able to share that information with us.
You bet. It's been great to be here, and glad I could spend an hour with you guys.